No, they can't wiretap us through our phones. They can only do that through, like, Amazon Alexa or whatever. You ever think about how we're in the future? Yeah, it's something we don't even really notice. The progression of technology over time has been so natural to the point that we don't even think about how far we've come. With the crazy things we saw in sci-fi movies getting closer and closer to reality. The most recent technological boom is certainly that of the smartphone, being essentially a miniature computer that renders just about every single other pocket device completely useless. You can keep up with your friends, keep up with the news, listen to music, do math, watch videos, use it as a GPS, spend money, and even let the world know about the things happening in your life. It's undeniable that the technology we have puts us in a pretty futuristic time period, and society has changed significantly because of all the advancements we've had. The sky's the limit in terms of how far we can go, and how the world will change because of it is only something we can dream of. This isn't a video game. In this day and age, we have whatever you could want: 3D, augmented reality, virtual reality, and graphics that are so advanced that fake people can look like real people. Our consoles aren't even used just for playing games anymore, with how we use them for other forms of entertainment too. Like, look, they put hundreds of movies onto a single Wii disc. Technology's so great. We truly have come a long way in terms of what video games can be, but also what the device we play them on can do. And I believe that all started with Sony's first ever attempt at entering the handheld video game market, the PlayStation Portable, also known as the PSP. Nowadays, when I see the PSP talked about, it's usually in reference to some of the pretty infamous commercials it had.
It's a nut you can play with outside!
PSP. It's like a nut you can play with outside.
Well, whoever wrote that is probably dead now. But I feel the system itself is way more important and ambitious than we give it credit for. To start off with, the system itself is a sleek rectangular oval of power, boosting full Wi-Fi capabilities, stereo sound, and a 4.3-inch screen all into this little machine. The back is left mostly empty except for its confident logo and labels which let you know where things like your memory stick and battery are. Speaking of which, did you know that these batteries are literally exploding? That's a fun fact that can damage your belongings. It's worth mentioning that there's also other models of the PSP. The one I'm holding is the PSP 1000, but there were also the 2000 and the 3000. For the most part, these were just slimmer models of the same system. However, there was also the PSP Go, which ditched physical media entirely, making it the butt of every joke on the internet for a while. Believe it or not, there was one more, something called the PSP Street. It was only released in PAL territories, ditched Wi-Fi capabilities, got rid of the stereo sound, and was only released as a cheaper alternative. This looks like a fake product that I'd seen in a video from 2009 titled PSP 2 Trailer Official. Now, instead of using cartridges like every other handheld ever made, it instead uses the Universal Media Disc, shortened as UMD, a form of media made exclusively for the PSP. It gives all the benefits of a disc-based format while remaining portable, but also has the convenience factor of cartridges by keeping these discs in these strangely shaped cases, making the discs themselves very hard to scratch or break. The PSP's hardware consists of two different processors, each running on 32-bit CPUs, one named the Allegrix and the other called the Media Engine. I couldn't tell you what any of this means, but from what I can tell it's more powerful than the DS and a little less powerful than the 3DS. That's a pretty big jump for a system that was only released a year after the DS, not to mention it's significantly more powerful than the N64 and the PS1, systems that were only just becoming 2 generations old at that point. With hardware like that, the PSP was able to deliver games of a console quality scale on something that fits in your pocket, which is honestly something I always dreamed of as a little kid. I remember getting the Nintendo DS with Super Mario 64 DS for my birthday and thinking, this is it! We're in the future, we can play Nintendo 64 games on the go! We'd surely be getting Mario Kart 64 DS, Donkey Kong 64 DS, or even maybe Kirby 64 DS. But instead all we got was Inevitable Disappointment 64 DS, which was actually a pretty okay game. The PSP, however, ran games that were nearly on the scale of PS2 games. There were even games that simultaneously released on both consoles and the PSP, with both versions being the same game. But it was amazing that we were able to buy games for a portable platform that would regularly be console exclusive and get roughly the same experience. It wasn't like the previous era on the Game Boy Advance or even the then current era on the DS, where you'd buy a game that had the same name as the console version, but was really a completely different game. These were straight up console games on the go. Nowadays, we make a big deal about the Nintendo Switch offering console games on a portable device, but the PSP was pretty close a whole 12 years before. Additionally, models after the 1000 allowed you to play your games on the TV by connecting a component cable to it, delivering a similar concept to the Switch where you can play it anywhere you go, but you can also hook it up to your TV when you get home. That's a pretty bold and innovative option for a handheld to have, and it's just another experiment on the path to where we are today. You ever get tired of being limited by your country? While the PSP is a pretty mountainous selection of games in the States, with over 600 games including incredible exclusives such as Loco Roco and Patapon, it's always fun to step out of your boundaries and try out games that never made it to your region. You don't even have to second guess importing games nowadays because all modern platforms are immune to the deadly disease known as region locking. But it wasn't always like that. In the 6th generation, all 3 consoles were region locked, but even then, handhelds were never the same way. Up until the 3DS, no handhelds were ever region locked. So technically the PSP was just following the tradition that the other handhelds have led, but there were other concurrent advancements that added up to making importing for the PSP easier than ever. The first is the rapid increase of computers becoming commonplace in American households, allowing people to more easily purchase games from international sources. And second is the establishment and growth of import-focused websites, such as one of the most well-known ones, PlayAsia, being established in 2002, only 3 years before the release of the PSP. I actually even have, in my opinion, pretty hard evidence that importing became that much easier with the PSP. I have this copy of Me and My Katamari, and as you can see it's the Japanese version, but I didn't import this myself. I walked into a local GameStop way back then looking for a regular copy of the game, and all they had was this used copy. I took the sticker off the spine, but now I wish I kept it there just as better evidence that it happened. Importing was just that commonplace for the system that Japanese games could show up at your local GameStop. The fact that importing games was so much easier now allowed ordering a game you were looking forward to from Japan because it released there early, and also trying out games that would never see a Western release. You had the opportunity to experience famous puzzle games like Panic Bomber and Puyo Puyo, discover music rhythm games like Taiko no Tatsujin and Poppin' Music, and you could even disappoint your family by buying one of the many games on the system that feature anime girls. My parents haven't spoken to me since I made this purchase. Nevertheless, not only could you get games from other regions in a physical form, but the PSP had a workaround that allowed you to access, purchase, and download things from the entire Japanese PlayStation Store. Much like how Nintendo now lets you do the same thing by using a Japanese account on your Switch. Having a digital store built into your consoles kind of became the standard, and I believe the PSP was the first to ever do such a thing. You could purchase full games, download demos, and even download trailers, but it additionally had a large amount of PlayStation 1 games available for sale as cheap as $5.99. Much more reasonable than the cost of games on Nintendo's Wii Virtual Console service, and unlike the Virtual Console, it doesn't use fake made-up terminology like Wii Points, it just calls it money. Also, not to mention, these were portable, giving a benefit that Nintendo wouldn't offer with their classic games until the 3DS. Actually, that's a lie. You could play Nintendo's retro games on the go by buying Ice Climber for $20. Now, as I stated before, we have smartphones to do any and all tasks that we would carry around a pocket device for. But for a handheld that released a whole 2 years before the iPhone, that's mainly supposed to be used for playing video games, it can do a lot. It has both a built-in web browser and media player. However, the web browser was a bit clunky and slow. But honestly, that never changed about console web browsers, so really it was ahead of the time, taking years off my life before the other browsers could. The media player aspects of the system, on the other hand, were no slouch. In a time where people still carried around MP3 players and portable DVD players, the PSP managed to combine both those things into one small device. You could put your music onto there and listen to it at any time, and you could also buy full movies, allowing you to enjoy an entire film in the palm of your hand. The fact that you could watch the SpongeBob SquarePants movie anywhere you go was pretty insane at the time. If all the things you could do with the base PSP weren't enough, You could also buy some pretty neat accessories for it. There was a camera called the Go Cam, known as the Choto Shot in Japan. Over there, it was bundled with a UMD called Choto Shot Edit, which was a software that let you edit photos and videos all on your PSP. Nowhere else in the world got this UMD, but in its place there was a software called Go Edit, which essentially acts as the same thing. The camera was later bundled with Invisimals and iPet. Both of these games used the camera to create gameplay focused around augmented reality, long before the 3DS. Invisimals being a monster catching fighting game, I think. And iPet being a virtual pet simulation game. Aw, look at him. He's adorable, oh god. There was also a GPS. I don't think there's much more I have to say. I mean, you can navigate your town with a PSP. I don't think you can really top that. So much neat tech stuffed into such a small device. It's a shame that it's gone underappreciated. It truly felt like a piece of the future, and given that so much of what it tried to do has become standard, it seems that it really was. I just can't think of another video game platform that made that much of a jump towards the standard, going from video game device that lets you play video games to video game device that lets you play video games and also listen to We Are the Robots by Kraftwerk. So, if I had to sum up the PSP in one sentence...
It's like a nut you can play with outside.